Legends whisper of a king from a half-forgotten West African empire, a ruler so wealthy his generosity on a single journey could break an economy. This was not a myth. This was history. Tonight, we journey back to the 14th century Mali Empire to tell the story of its legendary king, Mansa Musa, a man often called the richest person ever to have lived. We will follow his great caravan of gold and knowledge across the Sahara on its sacred pilgrimage. We will arrive at the fabled city of Timbuktu to witness its transformation from a remote outpost into a glittering center of wisdom that would become legendary throughout the world. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into the past, consider subscribing to our channel. It helps others find this peaceful corner of history. Now, settle in and let the sounds of the modern world fade away as we listen for the echoes of a golden age. Our story tonight begins not with a single man, but with the land that shaped him. Long before the great king, whose name would become synonymous with gold, there was the empire that drew its strength from the earth itself. To understand the heights that Mansa Musa would reach, we must first journey back to the foundations of his power, to a vast and vibrant landscape in the heart of West Africa, a region known as the Sahel. This is a world of sprawling savanna grasslands, of scattered baobab and acacia trees, a semi-arid realm that exists as a wide belt between the sands of the Sahara to the north and the dense rainforests to the south. It is a land of stark beauty, of long dry seasons and life-giving rains, and flowing through its heart like a great artery is the Niger River, a curving waterway that has nourished civilizations for millennia, its annual floods leaving behind rich, fertile soil for farming. It was here, in this cradle of African civilization, that the Mali Empire was born. The roots of Mali run deep, drawing sustenance from the history of the kingdoms that came before it. For centuries, the region had been dominated by the Ghana Empire, a powerful state that was the first to harness the incredible wealth of the trans-Saharan trade. The kings of Ghana, their capital at Kombi Saleh, grew rich by acting as middlemen, controlling the flow of gold from the southern forests to the salt mines deep within the desert. Camel caravans, the great ships of the Sahara, would arrive from the north laden with precious slabs of salt, a mineral essential for life in the hot climate, along with textiles, copper, and manufactured goods. In the markets of Ghana, these goods were traded for the gold dust that flowed from the south, from the legendary gold fields of Bambouk. The kings of Ghana taxed this trade heavily, becoming fabulously wealthy and powerful. But by the 11th and 12th centuries, the Ghana Empire began to weaken. A combination of internal succession disputes, droughts that strained its agricultural base, and pressure from the Almoravid movement in the north led to its fragmentation. The old power structure collapsed, leaving a vacuum. Into this void stepped numerous smaller kingdoms, each vying for control of the lucrative trade routes. One of these was the kingdom of the Soso people, led by a powerful and feared sorcerer king named Sumaoro Kante. He was a ruthless leader who conquered his neighbors, including the Mandinka people, the ancestors of the Mali Empire. He ruled through fear and magic, and it was into this era of oppression that a child of prophecy was born. The story of Mali's founding is an epic passed down through generations by the griots, the West African oral historians who are the keepers of memory. It is the story of Sundiata Keita, the true Lion King. According to the legend, a prophecy had foretold that a great king would come from the Mandinka people. Sundiata was born to the Mandinka king and his second wife, a woman said to be the reincarnation of a buffalo, hence her name, Sogolon, the buffalo woman. But the child who was destined for greatness was born frail. He could not walk. For years, he crawled upon the floor, his legs weak and useless, an object of scorn and ridicule, particularly from his father's first wife, who saw him as no threat to her own son's claim to the throne. When Sundiata's father died, his half-brother became king, and the persecution of Sundiata and his mother intensified. Fearing for their lives, they fled their home and went into exile, wandering for years through the kingdoms of West Africa. This journey, though born of hardship, became Sundiata's education. He learned about the different peoples of the savannah, their customs, their languages, and their military strategies. He grew into a powerful young man, his quiet demeanor hiding a deep well of strength and wisdom. The legend tells of the moment he finally chose to stand. His mother, insulted one last time, wept in despair. Seeing her pain, Sundiata declared that he would not only walk, but he would also bring her the entire baobab tree from the village square. He called for the blacksmith to forge a great iron rod. With immense effort, using the rod for support, he pulled himself to his feet. The rod bent under his power, and he stood tall for the first time, a symbol that the prophecy was ready to be fulfilled. Meanwhile, back in his homeland, the tyranny of the sorcerer king Sumaoro Kante had become unbearable. The Mandinka people, remembering the prophecy of a great liberator, sent messengers to find the exiled prince. They found Sundiata and pleaded with him to return and lead them to freedom. He accepted his destiny. He gathered an army, forging alliances with the other peoples who had suffered under Sumaoro's rule. The final confrontation came around the year 1235 at the Battle of Kirina. It was not just a battle of armies, but a battle of magic. Sumaoro was a powerful sorcerer, and the legends say that arrows would not pierce his skin. But Sundiata had learned the secret to his enemy's power. He fashioned a special arrow with a tip made from the spur of a white rooster, a magical antidote to Sumaoro's sorcery. As the battle raged, Sundiata fired this arrow, grazing Sumaoro's shoulder. The sorcerer king felt his power drain away and fled the battlefield, disappearing into the mountains, never to be seen again. With their leader's magic broken, the Soso army was defeated, and Sundiata Keita was victorious. From this victory, Sundiata forged a new unified state, the Mali Empire. He was not merely a conqueror, he was a brilliant administrator and a unifier. He established the Gbara, or Great Assembly, bringing together the clan leaders of the Mandinka and their allies to establish a government. At a great gathering, he is said to have proclaimed the Mandan Charter, an oral constitution that established rights and responsibilities for all citizens. It promoted justice, social order, and respect between the different clans, creating a stable foundation for the new empire. He established his capital at the city of Niani, a bustling center of trade and governance. With his empire politically secure, Sundiata turned his attention to its economic heart. He seized direct control of the three great gold fields of West Africa, Bambouk, Bure, and Galam. These were not mines in the modern sense, but vast alluvial deposits where gold dust and nuggets could be washed from the soil and riverbeds. This region was the source of a staggering amount of the world's gold supply at the time. Sundiata reorganized the production and trade, ensuring that this immense wealth flowed directly into the imperial treasury. He then solidified Mali's control over the trans-Saharan trade routes. The empire's economy was built on a symbiotic relationship between two precious commodities, gold from the south and salt from the north. In the deep desert mines of Tagaza, workers cut massive slabs of pure salt from the earth, a mineral so valuable that it was sometimes traded for its weight in gold. The camel caravans that braved the perilous journey south from the Mediterranean coast through cities like Sijilmasa would trade this salt, along with fine cloth, horses, and copper, for Mali's gold. But the trade included other goods as well. Ivory, cola nuts, and enslaved people were sent north, while books, beads, and manufactured goods came south. Sundiata and his successors created a secure environment for this trade to flourish. They policed the trade routes, dug wells at regular intervals to support the caravans, and established a system of standardized weights and measures. The emperor, the Mansa, held a monopoly on gold nuggets, while gold dust was allowed to circulate freely as currency. This sophisticated system of control and security made the Mali Empire not just a producer of wealth, but the master of a continent-spanning commercial network. The state grew fabulously rich, its influence stretching from the Atlantic coast in the west to the Great Bend of the Niger River in the east, from the edges of the Sahara in the north to the borders of the rainforest in the south. And so, the stage was set. Sundiata Keita, the Lion King, had taken a collection of oppressed peoples and forged them into one of the largest and wealthiest empires on earth. He had created a state with a strong political structure, a unified social charter, and an economic engine of unparalleled power. He had built a legacy of strength and stability that would last for generations. This was the great inheritance, the land of gold and the legacy of the lion that would one day fall to his descendant, a man who would take this immense wealth and show it to the world, a man named Musa. The empire, forged by Sundiata Keita, the Lion King, was a creation of profound strength and stability. For nearly half a century after his death, a succession of rulers known by the title Mansa, meaning King of Kings or Emperor, maintained the power and prosperity he had established. They governed from the capital of Niani, overseeing the steady flow of gold and salt that was the lifeblood of their kingdom. The Mali Empire was a land of order and immense wealth, its name known and respected along the trade routes of the Sahara, but it remained a power largely unknown to the wider world of Europe and the Middle East. It was a self-contained universe of commerce and tradition, secure in its own riches. The stage was set. The great inheritance was secure, but the man who would take this legacy and show it to the world was not yet on the throne. His path to power was opened by one of the most remarkable and mysterious stories in the annals of exploration. Before Musa, the throne of Mali was occupied by his predecessor, a man named Mansa Abubakari II. He was a ruler of a different kind. While others were content with the vast terrestrial empire they controlled, Abubakari was a man possessed by a single, all-consuming question: what lay on the other side of the great Atlantic Ocean? He was a visionary, a dreamer whose gaze was fixed on the western horizon. He believed that the ocean, like a great river, must have another bank, and he became determined to find it. He used the vast wealth of his empire to fund an unprecedented naval expedition. He ordered the construction of a fleet of 200 ships, each one equipped with sails and oars, and large enough to carry men, food, and water for a long journey. He gathered the finest sailors and navigators in his kingdom. He supplied them with enough provisions, he believed, to last for 2 years. His instructions to the fleet's commander were simple and absolute. Do not return until you have reached the other side of the ocean, or until you have run out of food and water. The fleet sailed west from the coast of what is now Senegal, a bold venture into the complete unknown. A long time passed. Seasons changed. Finally, a single ship returned. Its captain, weary and haunted, was brought before the Mansa. He told a grim story. The ships had sailed for many weeks until they came to a place in the middle of the ocean where a violent current, like a great river in the sea, began to flow. The ships were caught in this powerful stream. One by one, they were swept away, pulled into the watery abyss, and never seen again. The captain explained that his ship was the last in the line, and seeing what was happening, he had turned back. For most rulers, this would have been the end of the dream, a costly and tragic failure. But Abubakari's conviction was unshaken. He listened to the captain's story, not as a warning, but as a confirmation. There was something powerful out there, a force to be reckoned with, and he believed it was a path to another land. He was determined to lead a second, even grander expedition himself. He ordered the construction of a new fleet, this one numbering 2,000 vessels, 1,000 for the explorers, and another 1,000 to serve as supply ships, laden with gold, grain, fruit, and water. Before he departed, he had to ensure the stability of the empire he was leaving behind. He officially appointed his deputy as regent, granting him full authority to rule in his absence. That regent, who would govern the Mali Empire while his king sailed into the sunset, was a man named Musa. And so, around the year 1311, Mansa Abubakari II entrusted his vast kingdom to Musa's care, gathered his thousands of ships, and sailed west into the Atlantic, in pursuit of a world beyond the horizon. He was never seen or heard from again. After a year with no news, as was the arrangement, the regent was officially proclaimed the new emperor. He took the throne as Mansa Musa, the 10th Mansa of the Keita dynasty. He was a descendant of one of Sundiata Keita's siblings, a man of noble blood who had proven himself a capable administrator. He was also a devout Muslim, his faith a central pillar of his identity and his approach to governance. He was a man who understood not only the immense earthly power he now wielded, but also the spiritual responsibilities that came with it. He inherited an empire, but he would make it his own. Mansa Musa's early reign was characterized by the consolidation and expansion of the power base left to him. He was not a placeholder king. He was an active and ambitious ruler. He organized the administration of his vast territory, which was home to numerous different ethnic and language groups, including the Mandinka, Fulani, Soninke, and Songhai peoples. He appointed loyal governors to oversee the various provinces, ensuring that taxes and tribute flowed reliably to the capital. He was known as a just and fair ruler, and under his governance, the empire was peaceful and secure. An Arab traveler who visited years later would remark that there was such complete security in the land that a traveler could journey through it alone without fear. Under Musa's leadership, the Mali Empire reached its greatest territorial extent. It stretched for over 2,000 miles, from the Atlantic coast in the west, deep into the Sahara in the north, and encompassing the Great Bend of the Niger River in the east. He formally annexed the legendary trading cities of Gao and, most importantly, Timbuktu, which had previously been semi-independent. By bringing these vital commercial hubs under his direct control, he solidified his grip on the trans-Saharan trade, and the wealth of the empire swelled to unimaginable proportions. The gold that had been the foundation of Mali's power now flowed in an even greater torrent, cementing his status as the wealthiest monarch on earth. He was a master of both military power and soft power. His armies were vast and well organized, ensuring that rebellions were rare and that the empire's borders were secure. But he also ruled through patronage and faith. He promoted the spread of Islam throughout his realm, building mosques and encouraging the establishment of Quranic schools in the major towns. He understood that a shared faith could be a powerful, unifying force in his diverse empire. He balanced this with a respect for traditional, pre-Islamic beliefs, allowing his people to maintain their ancestral customs. This blend of strong central control, economic prosperity, and cultural tolerance made his reign the zenith of the Mali Empire, its true golden age. And so, after more than a decade on the throne, with his empire secure, prosperous, and larger than it had ever been, Mansa Musa began to plan for a journey of his own. But his journey would not be to the west in search of unknown lands. It would be to the east in search of God. As a devout Muslim, he was obliged to undertake the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. For a king of his stature and wealth, this would not be a simple private act of faith. It would be a statement to the entire world. It would be a procession of such scale, such wealth, and such splendor that it would transform the name Mansa Musa from that of an obscure African king into a global legend. The journey that would shake the world was about to begin. After more than a decade of peaceful and prosperous rule, with the Mali Empire at the zenith of its power, Mansa Musa turned his mind to a personal and sacred duty. As a devout Muslim, he was called to undertake the Hajj, the great pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. For a man of his status, this was to be no simple, solitary journey. It was a declaration of faith, a demonstration of power, and an act of diplomacy on a scale the world had never seen. From the heart of his empire, he would lead a procession so vast and so laden with gold that its story would echo through the centuries, transforming his name into a global legend. The preparations were monumental. From all corners of his sprawling empire, resources were gathered at the capital. In the year 1324, the great caravan was ready. It was not merely a group of travelers. It was a moving city of gold. The numbers, passed down by Arab chroniclers who witnessed its passage, are difficult to comprehend. The procession is said to have included 60,000 people. This immense gathering was composed of soldiers from the imperial army for protection, a full royal court of officials and attendants, doctors, teachers, and griots to sing the praises of the Mansa, a personal retinue of 12,000 attendants, all dressed in the finest silks, are said to have accompanied him. But the true spectacle was the gold. A train of 100 camels was dedicated solely to carrying this precious cargo, with each camel laden with 300 pounds of pure gold dust. Following them came 500 attendants, each of whom carried a staff of solid gold weighing 6 pounds. The rest of the caravan's thousands of camels carried the food, water, tents, and supplies necessary for a journey of nearly 4,000 miles. It was a river of humanity and wealth, flowing out from the savannah and into the vast, empty sands of the Sahara. As this glittering city moved, Mansa Musa demonstrated the piety that was the journey's inspiration. He was a benevolent ruler, even on the move. Contemporary accounts tell that wherever his caravan stopped on a Friday, the holy day of Islam, he would order the construction of a new mosque. Small, adobe structures rising from the desert floor, marking the path of his pilgrimage with houses of worship, many of which have long since returned to the dust from which they were made. After months of crossing the immense and dangerous desert, the caravan finally arrived in Cairo, the magnificent capital of the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt. It was one of the largest and most powerful cities in the world, a bustling center of trade and Islamic scholarship. But even Cairo was unprepared for the sight of Mansa Musa's arrival. The sudden appearance of this seemingly endless procession, with its thousands of people and its staggering display of gold, left the city's inhabitants in a state of awe and disbelief. The Sultan of Egypt at the time, Al-Nasir Muhammad, invited Mansa Musa to his court. Here, a delicate moment of diplomacy unfolded. According to custom, a visitor was expected to bow and kiss the ground before the Sultan. But Mansa Musa politely refused. He explained that as a devout Muslim, he would only prostrate himself before God. His quiet dignity and unwavering faith impressed the Sultan's court. A solution was found. Mansa Musa agreed to bow for God and then turned to greet the Sultan as an equal monarch. With this mutual respect established, the two rulers spoke, and Mansa Musa was welcomed as an honored guest. He would stay in Cairo for 3 months, and during this time, his generosity would become the stuff of legend. He gave gifts of gold to the Sultan and his officials. He bestowed fortunes upon the city's scholars, nobles, and religious leaders. He gave alms to the poor in the streets. He was also a lavish spender, paying for his entourage's every need and purchasing countless goods, from fine textiles to scholarly books, in the city's famous markets, always paying in pure gold dust. But this incredible generosity had an unintended and catastrophic consequence. Mansa Musa had brought so much gold into the city and spent it so freely that he completely overwhelmed the regional economy. The sudden, massive influx in the supply of gold caused its value to plummet. The price of goods, in turn, soared as the currency was devalued. The markets of Cairo, and indeed the entire Mamluk Sultanate, were thrown into a severe inflation crisis that would last for more than 12 years. A single man's piety and generosity had broken the economy of one of the world's great powers. This was the moment that the Mali Empire truly entered the consciousness of the wider world. The story of the fabulously wealthy African king who had showered Cairo with gold spread like wildfire along the trade routes, carried by merchants and travelers to the ports of the Mediterranean and from there into Europe. For the first time, Europeans became aware of the source of the West African gold that had trickled into their continent for centuries. Years later, in 1375, a Spanish cartographer created the Catalan Atlas, one of the most important world maps of the medieval era. On the section of the map covering West Africa, there is a drawing of a black king seated on a throne, wearing a golden crown and holding a solid gold orb in his hand. The caption next to him reads, "This black lord is called Musa Mali, Lord of the Blacks of Guinea." So abundant is the gold which is found in his country that he is the richest and most noble king in all the land. Mansa Musa's journey had literally put his empire on the map. The pilgrimage was a success, not just in faith, but in fame, and the journey was not yet over. The wealth he had spent was only one part of his mission. The knowledge he would now acquire would be just as important. Mansa Musa's legendary pilgrimage had left an indelible mark on the world. He had emptied his treasuries in a stunning display of piety and wealth, leaving the great cities of the Middle East reeling from the economic impact. The return journey across the Sahara was a more sober affair. Having given away so much gold, the Mansa found his own caravan running low on funds. In a moment of historical irony, the richest man in the world had to borrow money from Egyptian merchants to finance his trip home, but he did not return empty-handed. His journey had been one of acquisition as well as charity. He had recruited the finest minds he could find, scholars, theologians, poets, and scientists, and invited them back to Mali, promising them his patronage. His goal was not simply to return to his kingdom, but to bring the culture and knowledge of the wider Islamic world back with him. The most significant of these figures was a poet and architect from the Spanish kingdom of Granada named Abu Ishaq Ibrahim as-Saheli. He was a man steeped in the sophisticated artistic traditions of Moorish Spain. Mansa Musa was so impressed by him that he is said to have paid him 200 kilograms of gold to return with him to Mali. As-Saheli brought with him the advanced architectural techniques of North Africa, including the use of fired bricks and plaster, and a new vision for monumental construction. This, when blended with the traditional adobe or mud brick building style of the Sahel, would create a new and breathtaking architectural language. Upon his return, Mansa Musa began the most ambitious building program in the history of his empire. He commissioned new mosques and palaces in his capital and in the major trading hubs. But his grandest vision was reserved for a city that had recently come under his full control, a city whose name was already known to the caravan traders, but would soon become legendary: Timbuktu. Located strategically on the northernmost bend of the Niger River, Timbuktu was the natural meeting point for the desert caravans from the north and the river boats carrying goods from the south. It was a dusty, bustling nexus of trade. Mansa Musa saw that it could be much more. He envisioned it not just as a center of commerce, but as a center of faith and learning, a glittering jewel in his imperial crown. With the expertise of As-Saheli, he began the city's transformation. His first great project was the construction of the Jinguereber Mosque, the Great Mosque of Timbuktu. It was a monumental undertaking, built from pounded earth, wood, and straw. As-Saheli introduced the use of a wooden framework, which allowed for the creation of towering minarets and vast prayer halls. The building's most iconic features were the bundles of wooden beams, known as toran, that projected from its surfaces, serving both as structural support and as permanent scaffolding for the annual replastering of the walls. It was a perfect fusion of foreign technique and local materials, a building that seemed to rise organically from the desert landscape itself. Next to the mosque, the Mansa ordered the construction of a great royal palace, the Madugu, though no trace of it remains today. But his most enduring legacy in the city was not to be made of brick or mud, but of knowledge. He turned his patronage to the city's existing community of scholars, centered around the ancient Sankore Mosque. With his funding and support, this institution was transformed into the University of Sankore, one of the greatest centers of learning in the medieval world. The university was unique in its structure. It was not a single campus with enclosing walls. Rather, it was a decentralized collection of dozens of independent schools, each led by a master scholar or imam. Students would come from all across Africa and the Middle East to study at the feet of a particular master, paying their tuition directly to their teacher. There was no central curriculum. A student would study Islamic law with one master, astronomy with another, and medicine with a third, receiving a certificate for each subject they mastered. Upon completing their education, they would be recognized as a scholar, their turban a symbol of their learning. The scholarship was advanced and comprehensive. Students learned not just theology and the Quran, but also mathematics, physics, chemistry, philosophy, and linguistics. Timbuktu became a city of intellect, a place where the highest value was placed on knowledge. And the heart of this intellectual life was the book. In the Timbuktu of Mansa Musa's golden age, the most profitable and prestigious trade was not in gold or salt, but in books, a thriving industry of scribes, calligraphers, and bookbinders emerged, meticulously copying manuscripts by hand. These books, covering every subject from law to poetry, were imported from North Africa and the Middle East, and then copied and sold at a great profit. Wealthy scholars established vast private libraries, with some collections numbering in the tens of thousands of volumes. To own a book was a mark of status. To own a library was to be a pillar of the community. And so Mansa Musa's vision was realized. Timbuktu was transformed. It became a cosmopolitan city of learning, a beacon of knowledge shining at the edge of the great desert. Its name became synonymous with wisdom, wealth, and the highest achievements of Islamic culture in Africa. This was the true return on the king's investment. The gold he had given away in Cairo had earned him fame, but the knowledge he had brought back and the institutions he had built to nurture it would become his most enduring legacy, a gift of wisdom that would outlast the empire itself. A golden age, by its very nature, cannot last forever. When Mansa Musa died around the year 1337, he left behind an empire at the absolute zenith of its power, wealth, and cultural influence. It was a vast, peaceful, and well-administered state. Its name now spoken with awe in the courts of Cairo and the markets of Europe. From the outside, the Mali Empire must have seemed an enduring and permanent power, a timeless kingdom of gold. But the threads of history are ever weaving, and the very forces that raise an empire to great heights can, in time, gently unravel it. The decline of Mali was not a sudden, catastrophic event, but a slow and gradual fading, a long twilight brought on by weaknesses within and new powers rising beyond its borders. The empire did not collapse with its greatest king's passing. The foundations, built by Sundiata and perfected by Musa, were strong. The throne passed first to Musa's son, Mansa Musa. He was a ruler who enjoyed the immense wealth he inherited, but he lacked his father's administrative skill and military prowess. During his short reign, the first significant crack in the imperial edifice appeared. To the south, the powerful Mossi kingdoms saw an opportunity and launched a daring raid, sweeping north into the heart of the empire and even managing to capture and burn the city of Timbuktu. Though they could not hold the city, the raid was a symbolic blow, a sign that Mali's borders were no longer invulnerable. Stability was restored with the ascension of Musa's brother, Suleiman, around the year 1341. He was a strong and capable ruler, much more in the mold of his great brother. He drove back the Mossi, restored order to the provinces, and tightened his grip on the imperial administration. It was during his reign, in the year 1352, that the famous Arab traveler and scholar Ibn Battuta visited the Mali Empire. His detailed writings provide a priceless first-hand account of the empire's enduring splendor even after Mansa Musa. Ibn Battuta described a land of remarkable peace and security, noting that a traveler could journey for months without any fear of bandits. He was dazzled by the elaborate ceremonies of the Mansa's court, the ruler appearing on a great platform, flanked by musicians and warriors, a golden skullcap on his head and a golden bow in his hand. He noted the people's deep devotion to Islam, with the mosques full of worshippers on Fridays, and he wrote of the empire's immense wealth, which was still plain to see in the abundant use of gold. His account paints a picture of a mature, stable, and still immensely powerful state. But it was after Suleiman's death that the seeds of decline, sown in the very structure of the empire, began to sprout. The greatest weakness of the Mali Empire was its system of succession. The rules of inheritance were not always clear, and the death of a strong Mansa often triggered a period of intense and destructive conflict between rival claimants to the throne. Brothers, sons, and cousins from different branches of the Keita dynasty would raise armies and wage civil war to secure their power. These internal struggles were ruinous. They drained the imperial treasury, as vast sums of gold were spent on equipping armies rather than on building mosques or funding scholarships. They weakened the central military, as different factions of the army were pitted against each other. And most importantly, they eroded the authority and prestige of the Mansa. Provincial governors in distant parts of the empire, seeing weakness and chaos at the center, began to rule their territories as personal kingdoms, withholding taxes and ignoring edicts from the capital. Vassal states, once loyal, began to dream of independence. The great, unified empire slowly began to fragment from within. As Mali weakened internally, new powers on its periphery grew bolder. To the north, in the vast expanse of the Sahara, the Tuareg nomads, who had long controlled the salt caravans, began to exert their own authority. Sensing the loosening grip of the Malian army, they started to raid the southern cities and eventually captured the crucial salt mining center of Tagaza, cutting off a vital source of the empire's wealth. Their most significant blow came in the year 1433, when they swept down from the desert and seized control of Timbuktu, the city of books, the cultural jewel of the empire, was lost. But the most formidable threat emerged from within the empire itself. The Songhai people, centered around the great trading city of Gao on the bend of the Niger River, had been subjects of the Mali Empire for over a century. They were a proud and powerful people, and under the leadership of a new and ambitious royal dynasty, they began to assert their independence. The architect of their rise was a leader named Sunni Ali, who took the throne of Gao in 1464. He was a brilliant and ruthless military commander, and he harbored a grand vision to build a new empire on the ashes of the old. He built a powerful professional army and, most ingeniously, a fleet of war canoes to control the Niger River, the commercial highway of the region. He then began a systematic campaign of conquest. In 1468, he sailed his fleet upriver to Timbuktu, driving out the Tuareg and capturing the city for himself. He then turned his attention to another great center of trade and learning, the city of Djenné, which he captured after a long siege. With the fall of Timbuktu and Djenné, the economic heart of the old Malian Empire was now in the hands of the Songhai. The Mali Empire was not completely destroyed. It continued to exist, but it was now a shadow of its former self, reduced to a smaller kingdom around its original Mandinka heartland. The great days of imperial glory were over. In a final, poignant act, a Malian Mansa in the 16th century launched one last desperate campaign to reclaim his empire's lost territories from the Songhai. The attempt ended in a crushing defeat. It was the final, definitive sign that the age of Mali had passed, and the age of the Songhai had begun. The decline was complete. It had not been a sudden collapse, but a long, slow, and gentle fading over the course of 2 centuries. A story of an empire turning inward, consumed by its own divisions, leaving it vulnerable to the new, hungry powers rising around it. The great empires of history rarely vanish without a trace, though their political power may dissolve and their borders fade from the map. They leave behind echoes in the sand, whispers in the memory of the world. The Mali Empire, though it receded from its place of dominance, left a legacy so powerful, so rich in culture and legend, that it continues to capture our imagination to this day. Its story did not end with the rise of the Songhai. It simply transformed, shifting from a reality of political power into a timeless narrative of wealth, wisdom, and a forgotten golden age. At the heart of this legacy stands the figure of Mansa Musa. Even now, 7 centuries after his death, his name is consistently invoked in discussions of history's wealthiest individuals. When modern economists and historians attempt to calculate the richest people of all time, his name often appears at the very top of the list, his fortune deemed too vast to even properly quantify. This reputation is not merely about a number, it is about the scale of his influence. His wealth was not just personal, it was national. He controlled the source of more than half of the world's gold supply at a time when gold was the ultimate measure of power. And he demonstrated, through his legendary Hajj, that he had the capacity to wield that wealth on a global stage, single-handedly altering the economies of foreign nations. His story provides a powerful and essential counter-narrative to the way much of the world has viewed African history. It is a brilliant reminder of a pre-colonial era when a West African empire was a true global superpower, a center of immense wealth, complex administration, and international prestige. The image of Mansa Musa, immortalized on the Catalan Atlas with his golden crown and orb, is a testament to a time when the world looked towards West Africa with a sense of awe and wonder. Just as the king became a legend, so too did his city. In the centuries following the decline of the Mali Empire, the name Timbuktu became a kind of myth in the European imagination. It was a golden city, a lost El Dorado at the heart of the world's largest desert. It became a synonym for the most remote, exotic, and unreachable destination imaginable, a place at the very edge of the map. To say you were going from here to Timbuktu was to say you were going to the farthest corner of the earth, but the true legacy of Timbuktu was never its gold. The city's real treasure was its knowledge, the hundreds of thousands of precious manuscripts that were collected, copied, and studied during its golden age represent one of the most significant intellectual heritages in human history. These were not just religious texts. The libraries of Timbuktu were filled with works on medicine, astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, geography, and poetry. There were detailed legal codes, histories of great empires, and treaties on ethics and diplomacy. They were written in Arabic and in local African languages, a vast repository of both Islamic and African scholarship. For centuries, as empires rose and fell around them, the great families and librarians of Timbuktu understood that this knowledge was their most precious inheritance. They protected the manuscripts, hiding them away in cellars and secret rooms during times of invasion and instability. This quiet, determined act of preservation continued for generations, a sacred trust passed from father to son. This ancient duty took on a new and heroic urgency in the modern era. In 2012, when extremist groups with a mission to destroy this cultural heritage took control of Timbuktu, a small group of the city's librarians and citizens orchestrated a daring rescue. Risking their lives, they smuggled the manuscripts out of the city by night, packing them into metal trunks and hiding them on donkey carts and riverboats, transporting them hundreds of miles to safety. It was a powerful echo of the city's past, a modern-day caravan, not of gold, but of knowledge, saving the legacy of their ancestors from destruction. Thanks to their courage, the vast majority of the Timbuktu manuscripts survive today, a testament to the enduring power of wisdom over ignorance. This written legacy, however, is only one half of the story. The history of the Mali Empire has also been preserved in a form far older than ink and paper, in the living memory of the griots. The griots, or Jeli, are the oral historians, the hereditary storytellers, poets, and musicians of West Africa. For nearly 800 years, they have been the living libraries of their people. They have memorized the great epic of Sundiata, the lineages of the Mansas, the laws of the empire, and the stories of its heroes and its failures. Sitting with a kora, a stringed instrument like a harp, a griot can recite these histories for hours, for days, not as a dry list of facts, but as a living, breathing performance of poetry and song. It is through their unbroken chain of memory, passed from master to apprentice for centuries, that the spirit of ancient Mali has been kept alive. Without their voices, the story of Sundiata might have been lost forever, a quiet whisper in the dust. And so, our journey through the story of Mansa Musa and his golden empire draws to its peaceful conclusion. We have walked the savannah and heard the legend of the Lion King. We have followed a river of gold across the desert and witnessed a city transformed into a beacon of knowledge. And we have watched as the great empire slowly faded, its power giving way to new forces, its legacy entrusted to ancient manuscripts and the memories of storytellers. It is a story that reminds us of the great cycles of history, of the rise and fall of power, and of the enduring truth that the most valuable treasures are not always the ones that glitter. The gold of Mali is long gone, scattered to the winds of time. But the stories, preserved in ancient ink and living memory, remain. They are echoes in the sand, a quiet testament to a time when a West African king was the richest man in the world, and his desert city was the brightest center of learning. As you rest now, letting the echoes of this forgotten empire settle into the quiet of your thoughts, remember the great flowing river of human history, the triumphs and the tragedies, the golden ages and the long twilights, all part of a single, continuous story. You, too, are a part of that story, a keeper of memory in your own small way. Sleep well.